Let's talk about the Joint Commission and the role a Joint Commission plays in reviewing a hospital's performance.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter.
Good afternoon, Dr. Corcoran. Good afternoon, Mr. Hunter.
I thought you said you didn't have to report.
I don't know, sir. You're not
listening.
Perhaps I'm not being clear today. I do not have access to the 2018 report.
That sound was Hunter's soul leaving his body.
I thought I buried this Dracula several years ago.
But you have an opinion to a reasonable management probability that the failure of the medical executive committee to address this caused or contributed to the harm of Mike Kowalski.
Objection. Beyond scope. 1 minute.
You can answer.
Thank you. I do believe that this failure on the part of the governing body contributed.
And this particular individual happens to also be remarkably charismatic and have phenomenal hair to combine with my, I guess, phenomenal beard.
At 2, Rob, you're going to jump on the good hair stuff too? Really?
Dude, why not? I mean, I can't keep this thing in order.
Thank you for that. And speaking of looking fabulous, coming to the program right now, Dr. Joe Corcoran, who we have also labeled here as Dr. Good Hair. How are you?
I'm great. Good evening, advocates everywhere. I am Dr. Joe Corcoran, CMO Dr. Joe. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me again this evening, wherever you are. And you know, I'm super excited about tonight. This was a program that came together very, very recently. One of my guests this evening is someone that I actually just met. Someone in the chat was giving me a hard time a couple of weeks ago, because they commented about how is it that every guest is a dear friend, and I will tell you that one of my guests tonight is a dear friend. Megan is actually probably the biggest reason why I have a YouTube channel today. She was so encouraging and such a great mentor, and along with some others, but she was really the one who gave me the biggest push. She also gave me the Dr. Good Hair nickname and titled my lovely wife Patty as the gregarious Greek goddess, or the phenomenal Triple G. But my other guest is someone that I just met in the last couple of days, and I'm really excited to introduce him to you tonight to talk about some really candidly difficult conversation. We had a really interesting conversation 2 weeks ago, a little bit less than 2 weeks ago, with Stephanie Spurgeon. Stephanie was the mom and now grandmom who spent 8.5 years in maximum security prison, 5.5 years in maximum security, 8.5 incarcerated in the state prison system in Florida for a conviction that was largely based on opinion and conjecture, not on data and science, which was ultimately overturned. And that, hands down, has been the hardest conversation that I have had to lead since I started this channel late November, early December. This one's going to be up there too, only because as a parent of 2 children, and granted they're grown, they're college-age kids, as we talk about this system that, and we're going to focus on the state of Georgia, as we talk about this system that has separated moms and dads from kids, it just touches too many nerves close to my fatherhood genes. So this is going to be a tough one for me, but I think it's such an important conversation. And I'm really, really blessed that Megan Fox and Spike Cohen are going to be joining me. I do want to thank Megan for inviting me to be on her program this morning. We had a very, very, very lively conversation, and if any of the members of the Fox's Den are here, welcome. You're always welcome to join the advocates. But before we get to the main topic, I do want to share something that showed up in my email feeds this morning. Oops, sorry, Spike.
No problem. I'll be right back, everyone.
be with you in one sec. So this is an article that was published in Becker's, which is a medical news aggregator. But the headline is Penn Medicine Hospital's Immediate Jeopardy cleared in 5 hours. In November, CMS placed a Penn Medicine Hospital, so University of Pennsylvania, based in Philadelphia, placed a Penn Medicine Hospital in immediate jeopardy for 5 hours after a possible preventable death. Now, this was a patient who went into one of Penn's behavioral health hospitals and unfortunately had a very, very bad outcome. Ended up with what is likely a heart attack. But their response to it was intensely rapid. If you have a chance to read through this, and I can post this in the community notes later, but this shows how a hospital takes the threat seriously and responds quickly. If you'll remember, there was quite a bit of conversation between me and Mr. Hunter about when did JHACH clear their immediate jeopardy. And if you remember, it was made public in January. It was post-dated or backdated to September. And at the end of the day, they signed an agreement the following May that they agreed to have an outside auditor on campus for the next 12 months. And the IJ wasn't cleared, but the financial threat with the IJ went away once they entered that 12-month agreement. I just wanted to share that. Knowing the topic that we were discussing today, I thought it was timely that it showed up in my feeds this morning. So most of us met during the Take Care of Maya trial when I was an expert witness and helped to answer some of the questions for the judge, the jury, around my opinion was how the organization failed the Kowalski family. Megan Fox is a journalist who has done an awful lot in her career, but over the last 20 years, much of her energy has been focused on this topic that is kind of lumped under the umbrella of medical kidnapping. So I'm really excited to have her here to bring that depth of experience, insight, expertise. Again, we had the recent conversation with Stephanie. Post-verdict, Megan immediately picked up on another case that had similarities to the Kowalski's challenges, and that was the case of the Hernandez family in suburban Atlanta that we'll talk about. They got separated from their baby. It's a very, very ugly situation, but I'll have Megan bring us up to speed on that. And then my other guest, Spike Cohen, I was unaware of Spike until I saw a I saw a tweet that he put up on X. I don't know what you call them anymore. I still call them tweets, but look at how this starts. Breaking. The judge has just ordered non-reunification. That means that the Sullivan children may be placed for adoption. Corey and Diana would have to pay $2,000 in child support every month and may not be able to see their children again. As a parent, that made my head explode and my heart explode. So I reached out to Spike, who I had not met, and he graciously agreed to join me for a conversation about the Sullivans tonight. So I'd like to bring on my amazing guests, the Megan Fox, not the one who drinks blood.
That's right.
But
and I also do not have toe thumbs. I have regular thumbs. If everyone can see, regular thumbs, normal thumbs, not toe thumbs. That's important.
And Megan calls me Dr. Good Hair, but she's got some pretty great hair herself. Let's give Megan the props.
With hair.
And then Spike Cohen, very nice to meet you today, Spike. Thank you for joining us. Spike, your work includes medical kidnapping, but that's really just a part of your portfolio, isn't it?
Yes. So a little bit of background about what I do. And thank you for having me on, by the way. I was on briefly before and I got to say hi to everyone, but thank you for having me on the show. I do concur with everyone else. Your hair is amazing. I say that as someone whose hair is crumbling as we speak. But yes. So You Are the Power, which is the nonprofit that I started in 2022. The long story short of what we do is we find people who are being abused and disrespected by their local governments, and we help organize their local community and our network of thousands of activists across the country to get them the justice and respect that they deserve. And we don't stop until we win. And we have operated in dozens of states, worked on well over 100 causes at this point. We've reached somewhere close to 100 to 150 million people with our causes. And they all revolve around various examples of local government abusing their authority and harming people just because they don't respect them. Eminent domain abuse, where a convalescent home was being seized in order to build a parking lot because it enriched the value of the city council members' adjacent properties. We recently dealt with a few cases of zoning abuse where people, for the most obscure of zoning or bylaw infringements, were being threatened with having their properties seized and stolen because those officials wanted it. We've dealt with cases where people who were feeding people who were in need were threatened with jail time if they continued feeding them because they didn't get the permit to do so. And many other cases like that. And the vast majority of the time, close to 90% of the time at this point, we win. The first case that was brought to our attention of medical kidnapping, or frankly, I'll call it child trafficking, and I'll dive into that a little bit more on why I say that. It is. It's profit motive driven taking of children. That's called the child trafficking. But anyway,
careful though. The second you say it, they're going to call you a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, well, that's why I'm happy to explain the details of why I call it that. But you're right. So our first case that we found out about of this nature was Matt and Tucky Hernandez. And we found out in, I believe, either September or October of last year. And what we do at You Are the Power, the bulk of the work we do, no one ever actually gets to see, because the first thing we do before we take on a cause is we heavily vet it to make sure it's not a lie. Because a lot of stuff that's brought to our attention turns out not to really be the truth, or there was a whole lot of context missing, or this is not a sympathetic character we're dealing with, or something like that. Once we vetted this cause, and we were very skeptical when we first heard of this, that, a child has been taken and there was suspicion of abuse, but the child actually has a diagnosed or heavily suspected medical condition that caused this, and there's no evidence of abuse, there has to be something missing here. what was missing was that we didn't realize just how bad this was. And since we came public with the Hernandez story, we have since had dozens of different families reach out to us. We've now also talked about the Sullivan family, the Timms family, also both of them in Georgia, the Sanders family, which is actually in Dallas, Texas. And it's just, we are having people come out of the woodwork saying this happened to us. And it's the same thing over and over again. It is a child is taken to an emergency room. The hospital has every bit of evidence to show that they have a medical condition, and instead they call it abuse. And then the destroying of that family begins from there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and Megan, I know that parallels your experience exactly. And you were on the Hernandez case early.
It was Spike. By the way, Spike, great to meet you. I have wanted to have you on the show.
Great to meet you as
I know
well.
we've been, ships passing in the night. But I thank you for bringing these things to the attention of the public in a way that nobody else really has done before. Those of us who have been reporting on this stuff, we're kind of like on the fringes, and we get called all kinds of names for saying that the government is stealing kids and they're profiting from it. And they are. And we can prove that they are, because we can see that there's federal dollars, there's state dollars, there's especially if the child has medical conditions or psychological conditions. If they can attach these conditions, the fees go up. They go up and up and up. I've been covering these cases for years. The Cynthia Absug case is one of the worst I've ever seen. They railroaded that woman right into jail. They said that she attempted a kidnapping. That never happened. It just literally never happened. There was no plan to kidnap. There was no attempt to kidnap. And yet they managed to get it through anyway. I have extensive coverage of that on pjmedia.com, where I write. I will drop, if I've been modded. Have I been modded? Hello.
We're trying.
Okay, there I am. I'm in the chat right now,
Your host is
Kelly.
just learning this stuff.
It's okay. I will drop links in the chat as soon as I get my wrench, so I can show you where my reporting is and what I've done on the Hernandez case. So the Hernandez case came to my attention through Spike. Spike does an amazing job on social media. Amazing. Better than anyone I've seen, to bring attention to these cases. And he made a wonderful video. Please never stop making those, Spike. They're so good. I wish I had thought of it.
We got two more coming out down in the next week.
Ryan told me today on my program, you guys need to go and watch my program earlier today, because Ryan Ralston from You Are the Power was on. We were talking about the Timms case. Hernandez case is just, it's mind-bendingly bad.
It is.
I had Matt Hernandez on my channel, right after that broke. He came on, he shared his father's heart. He cried. We all cried with him. It is not something that anyone wants to ever go through. I've been in a situation where my husband had to take my daughter to the ER because he was the one who dislocated her elbow in it. He was throwing her around in the leaves. They were spinning like you do with kids. You pick them up by the arms and you spin them around and you throw them somewhere. Like he threw her in a pile of leaves. Well, he dislocated her elbow, and that's called nursemaid's elbow. It can happen if you're just walking down the street holding hands with your child and you accidentally, pull them a little too hard and out it pops. Thank God he had an ER doctor that day who was like, don't worry, this happens all the time. Thank God, because it could have gone the other way. It could, and we 100%. All know it. Could have gone the other way. I've covered so many of these cases, Joe. I hate that Spike has to exist, but I love that he does.
Equally, yes.
He's doing the work that I haven't seen anybody be able to do, which is bring a huge number of eyes to this. And I'm just so grateful that he's here.
You Are the Power shouldn't have to exist. Like the cases we take on, I have yet to meet someone who can, in good faith, look at the causes we take on, believe what we're telling them, and say, I'm okay with that. Even the officials won't say that they're okay with it. They always either say nothing or just back off and do the right thing, because even they know that they're doing the wrong thing. It is absolutely egregious what is happening. And when you consider the fact that there is a level of this that is ignorance, the fact that people are just not doing their jobs, there's a level of ineptitude, but there's also, because of the federal dollars, they see a kid with a chronic health condition and they go, cha-ching.
Yep.
If we call this abuse, we will get so much federal money. If we can actually get non-reunification and completely destroy this family and have these children put up for adoption, we get way more federal money. And not just that, but when we go for the annual budget requisitions, we try to get more money from at the state level, we're absolutely going to be able to get more money because we'll be able to say, look at how many more abuse cases of disabled children. It's an epidemic. Look at all these abused children that have these chronic health conditions. And meanwhile, it's all a lie. They're not being abused, or at least a significant number of them are not being abused. Thousands of families are going through this across the country. And unfortunately, most people, because of a combination of normalcy bias and just assuming that, they're not hearing the whole story, when they hear this, not only do they have to deal with losing their children, not only do they have to deal with facing jail time for a crime that literally didn't happen, they then face the stigma of their local community saying, I bet it actually was abuse. And so many times they don't even tell anyone. They just take it on the chin. And the bravery of these families to come forward and say, I want you to tell millions of people what is happening in our private life. We couldn't do this without their bravery.
Yeah,
that's true.
And thank goodness you've taken this on. Because it's, again, I was completely naive to this part of the world. I didn't know that LawTube existed. I didn't know that the separation of Maya from her parents was as commonplace as it is. I'm actually surprised to hear that You Are the Power is less than 2 years old.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, tell me about how it got started and how it's grown so quickly.
So in 2020, I was the Libertarian Party's candidate for vice president. And I went across the country. I visited 35 or 36 states. I visited many states.
Wait. You weren't the guy who took his clothes off on stage, were you?
No, that was 8 years ago. Yeah, no, that wasn't.
Thank God.
I'm not that guy. No, I definitely not. So I went across the country and I was meeting people who were in need in their local communities. At the same time, I was talking to all these activists who would show up and say, this is great to do every 4 years, but what about the rest of the time? And I thought, here are people here are a bunch of people that want to help others and do something year round. And here are people in their backyard who need help. I'm going to combine that. And so, and starting in 2021, as a proof of concept, we started taking on like 4 or 5 different causes during that year to see, would this actually work? Before we start, creating a 501c3 and, asking for donations or whatever, let's see if this even has legs. And it did. It caught on very quickly. That led to us officially launching the nonprofit You Are the Power in May of 2022. So we're actually less than 2 years old officially, and ever since then we've been going at it strong. We have been growing very quickly, and it has been because at its core, we are not here to try to convince someone to think different politically. We're just trying to acknowledge that when the government disrespects people as individual human beings and sees them instead as a means of getting money or a political, a political abstraction or a political opponent or an obstacle to their growth of power or something like that, the moment they do that, the moment they dehumanize you in their minds, they can do the most horrific things to you while still seeing themselves as good people. These officials that are doing this, the people we're going to talk about, these child abuse physicians and these judges and these DAs, these people don't wake up and go, what terrible things can I do to the families of my state? They wake up and they probably kiss their kids or their grandkids and their spouse. They probably, a lot of them, I'm sure, go to church. They are absolutely consider themselves good, well-meaning people. And then they go to work and destroy people's lives because that's the system that's been put in front of them. Yeah. As long as
Dr. Pena has 4 kids, 4 children. Imagine that if he were held to the same standards he holds other
Yep.
people to, we went over his YouTube. He has like this YouTube training session. Dr. Pena does. I don't know if you've seen this, Spike, but
No, I haven't.
really something. I'm going to send you a link to it. It is unbelievable. He lays out what he's looking for as far as red flags for neglect and abuse. One of them is breastfeeding mothers.
Excuse me.
That's a red flag for him. In the case of a failure to thrive child, his red flag is a breastfeeding mother. It's like,
Oh my.
how
Wow.
behind the times are we that we are still blaming women for not producing enough milk? Because that's not how it works. Okay. That's just,
Yeah.
we got over that in like 70 something. And yet he's
Yeah.
still on this. Oh, it's got to be mom. She's not producing enough milk
Yeah.
and they're not getting the vitamin D and they need this nasty, disgusting stuff we sell in the grocery store instead.
Yeah. Well, we've had cases where the reason that the doctor, we actually I had forgotten it in the middle of all this. We actually several months earlier, before all of this last year, we had a case of Rodney and Tamisha Jackson with their child baby Mila. Their pediatrician didn't like the fact that they did an at-home birth with a midwife instead of coming into the hospital. So we called the police. And they took the kid, the newborn baby, and they didn't have that newborn child in those first few weeks, the most crucial weeks of that child's development. They didn't have that child. We did finally help get that child home. But, we don't know how much damage has been done to that baby because a pediatrician actually, I don't know now. I don't remember now if it was a pediatrician. I think it was actually their OBGYN didn't like the fact that they didn't come into the hospital. The red flag there that made him call the police at midnight is the fact that they did their birth the way just about every birth was done until about 60, 70 years ago.
For thousands of years.
Yeah.
For all of humanity's existence.
That is a real problem though, too. I in Colorado in particular, there are a lot of like hippie moms, right? In Colorado, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like they will do doula, they'll have doulas at home and they'll give birth at home. But get this, I covered a case once where a woman had been prescribed in Colorado marijuana for her morning sickness. She was prescribed it in Colorado, like literally doctor prescription. She had such terrible morning sickness that she couldn't eat, she couldn't function. So they prescribed a low dose of marijuana so that she could eat. So this went on, the baby was born marijuana positive, of course, because she had been on a low dose of marijuana.
She's taking medication. Exactly.
Medication.
Yeah.
They took the baby, Spike, in Colorado where
And it's
marijuana
legal.
use is legal. No.
Yeah.
You don't understand. This is going on everywhere. There was a story of a little girl in Arizona. I will never get over it again. In Arizona, at the time, marijuana wasn't legal, but the baby didn't test positive. But dad, when they got involved in whatever this case was, made him do a drug test. He tests positive for marijuana. That's it. Not the baby, just dad. Test positive for marijuana. They take his baby away. She is then put into the home of, and I kid you not, this is a true story. She's put into the home of a sex trafficker.
I wish I could say that surprised me.
Who hurts her so badly that she's put into a coma in the children's hospital where they will not let her biological family visit her. Not allowed. Not allowed. They burned her. Her body was burned. Over 3/4 of her body burned with the abuse and yet they took this child away from two decent parents because they tested positive for marijuana. We live in a society that has lost its damn mind. I'm sorry, Joe. I've had a few glasses of wine. I was cooking earlier. I cannot vouch for what's going to come out of my mouth, but we live in a society that has lost its mind.
We live in a society of people who have put aside the expectation of being respected as a human being that they have for literally everyone else. If you or I were to go to them and say, "Hey, look, I don't like that your doctor prescribed that to you, so I'm going to steal your kid and give it to a rapist," they would say, "Get out of my house before I kill you," right? But if a government official does it, and their neighbors would help them, right? The whole neighborhood would band together to stop me and make sure I never did that again. If a government official, the exact same person acting outside of their authority as a government official, did the same thing, they would band together to stop that person too. But as soon as that exact same human being steps behind that dais or behind that official title and says, as a child abuse physician, I'm going to steal your child and give it to or I'm going to say it's abuse. And then someone else shows up and says, as a child protective caseworker, I'm going to steal your child and give it to a sex trafficker, to a sexual abuser.
There's nothing you can do.
Then there's nothing you can do. And the majority of the public goes, well, maybe there's more to this story. And that's the problem. That was the reason that You Were the Power was started, is that not just to help these individual people, but to show people, to show the public on a case by case, time after time basis, this is happening. It's happening on a regular basis. It's happening in your backyard. It's not happening in, the halls of Congress or anything. It's happening in your local city councils, county councils, state children's health departments, state children's hospitals. It's happening in your backyard. You can do something to stop this, but the first thing you have to do is expect that they're going to treat you with respect and fight until you get it if they're not treating you that way.
And one of the things that I want to point out is that a lot of this concentrated power was predictable. And I want to play for the group. Go back to the testimony that was presented in the Maya trial in October with.
But I just wanted to clarify.
Dr.
Did you ever
Eli
take
Neuberger.
any licensing board examinations to have a child abuse pediatrics board certification?
The answer is no, but it requires a bit of deeper explanation, which I will now give you, which I don't believe I testified to previously. In the late 1990s, under the aegis of the American Academy of Pediatrics, a group of physicians, including people like myself, founders of the field, met to consider whether we should have a subspecialty in this field. And there was discussion about what this might be called and what would be the foundations with regard to clinical practice and behavioral, social, and medical science. And it was a very productive conversation among people that I knew very well over the years because I'd taught at their institutions and they'd read my publications, and some indeed had served postdoctoral fellowships in my in the 17-year pendency of my federally funded training program at Boston Children's Hospital, which trained some of the leaders in the field. The discussion was around what we should call this specialty, were someone to be approved by the American Board of Medical Specialties. And the consensus at the outset was we should call this child abuse pediatrics. I objected for the following reasons: that if we were to call this child abuse pediatrics, what it would result in would be a small field of people who would be assigned the task in hospitals of thumbs up or thumbs down, this is child abuse or not. And that was an overly simple technical function, and further couldn't be based on any body of science which would justify creating a new specialty with this name. Rather, I argued, it would be far better to call this specialty, taking cognizance of the fields of forensic psychiatry, forensic pathology, to call this forensic pediatrics, which would have as its foundation child development, family development, behavioral science as it manifests in relationships and in violence in relationships, biodynamics in regard to the transmission of various vectors and forces and flames and the like that impelled injury, which would be understood in those frames. But where the objective, as the other forensic medical specialties would be, to inform decision makers in the legal sector with authoritative opinions about the science that was important to their decision making. Anyway, I made this point. There was some consideration, but the consensus was to call it child abuse pediatrics. And ultimately, the sub-board had an exam and a certification process, and I decided as one of the founders of the field, that I would not take this exam.
Okay. All right.
Frauds.
Instead would apply to the peer reference group, the Ray Helfer Society, to be an emeritus member. And they happily accepted me, and I've been an
Child
emeritus
abuse pediatrics is a
ever
fraud.
since. I pay my dues every year.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
God, I
You know,
love
and
him.
you know what I think is remarkable about this is, first of all, the this was, in my opinion, the first drop the mic moment in the testimony in the Maya trial. The second part was David Hughes, who was the attorney interviewing or examining Dr. Newberger. How many times did he try to change the subject when he realized, this was not going the way he
Don't
expected
ever
it?
ask the question that you don't have the
You
answer
don't know
to.
the answer to.
Perfect example.
Isn't that first day of law school, right?
And I think what actually happened here was they thought that they knew the answer, which was no. They didn't know why. And he didn't just explain what the problem is with the whole idea of child abuse pediatrics. He also explained why they didn't listen to him. It's federally funded. They want an easy metric to get federal money, because federal money is really just monopoly money that's printed out on a printing press by the trillions every year. They don't care where it's going. They're literally just throwing money out. 40% of all the dollar bills that were ever created have been created between 2020 and 2022. Nearly half of the money that's ever been created was created in a 2-year time frame, and we wonder why the cost of living is so out of control. But anyway, it's a whole other subject.
Right.
The bottom line is that there is all this money being thrown out, and all you have to do is come up with an easy metric to get it. Well, what's easier than having a specialist say, this child was abused? I just decided this right now, having just looked at this kid, and abuse. This was abuse, and getting thousands, or in some cases tens of thousands of dollars to multiple actors.
They didn't want his metrics, his multidisciplinary approach, because that would be too complicated. That would require too much school. It would require too much study. Whereas Dr. Newberger, by the way, he dedicated his entire life to the study of abused children. This man is a legend. Put him in charge. Put him in charge. How is he doing, Joe? Is he good? Is he okay?
I've not had an update in quite some time. Somebody in the comments actually suggested that he passed away.
I can't find an obituary.
I do not think that that's the case.
If he did, we would know.
I know that he was improving slowly, but I've not had a conversation with Greg recently about Dr. Newberger. But I do believe that he is still with us, and I hope to God he still is. I would personally love to have a conversation with him one day and thank him.
That would be great. What he exposed there is huge, because it shows that at its outset, the people with the most expertise were saying, this is not how we should be doing it. And they sided with that because, like Megan said, they want the easier metric. They don't want to actually find out if someone was being abused. They want for there to be a basically an on-call primary care type level physician to have a financial incentive to call everything that gets put in front of them abuse. And that's what they got. And that's what we have now. And that's why I call it child trafficking, because you have a system, you have an actual system with multiple employees and an entire structure and hierarchy that is built around taking children from their families and putting them in other homes for a built-in financial incentive. That is child trafficking.
Spike, did you
know?
But
here's the problem.
Did you know that they actually get more financial funds for increasing those numbers, the states? So every year, if they don't meet or exceed their numbers from last year, they lose their federal funding.
They lose money.
Have you ever heard of anything so damn stupid in your life? If you
there's other programs in the government run the same way.
Yes, I was exactly what Dr. Joe said. Yes, it's called every other government agency.
Every other government program.
But in this case, it's dealing with children and families. And that's the problem.
Your libertarian roots are probably why I like you so much, because really this does though go back to politics, because you can't get away from politics, right? You can't get away from how you view the world and how you view the government's role in that world. And we keep coming back to this big government problem, which is what we're seeing on both sides, Democrats, Republicans, they don't care. They just want to make government as big as possible so that they
Power,
are, you
money,
know,
and power.
create
Yep.
their money and power. They're getting as much money into their war chests as possible. Those of us who are like on the outside, who are like, I'm not a part of either one of these, is going, stop profiting off of the misery of your people,
Yep.
for one.
And you know, Spike, earlier today when Megan was interviewing Ryan, we talked about the system that you just talked about, that they built this system.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's so poorly managed and it's understaffed. They don't have enough. They don't have enough employees at DFCS and other organizations like it. There's huge turnover, so that's being mismanaged, and they're under supplied with even foster homes that are safe and available, right? I mean, Megan, you talked about, you know, some of the marketing that was going on about, hey, I'll give you an extra $100 if you take this kid tonight, right? Sleeping in offices, sleeping in cars.
I just
Hotels.
interviewed a girl involved in the What the Hales case. So sad, in Florida. She's grown now. She's an adult, but she came out to tell her story about her situation being in an actually abusive home. And when her caseworker happened to show up while she was being abused and heard it through the door, the caseworker grabbed her, said, "Get your stuff," put her in the car, and she said they drove around for hours because he was on the phone the entire time trying to find a place for her to go. And we're talking about a girl who was literally being pulled out of an abusive situation at that moment, an emergency, and there's nowhere for her to go. They drove around for like 5 hours before they had some place for her to sleep that night.
Yeah.
That is outrageous when you consider the amount of money that is in this system and how much is allocated to this system. There's no excuse for it. I'm sorry, but there's none.
And the thing
And
is,
God
if
bless,
they were,
and God bless that worker that committed 5 hours to
Right.
saving this kid in the moment.
Tell me about it. True.
Yeah.
True.
guys,
Sorry, Spike.
no problem at all. And because you're right, that actually led into what I was about to say. Dr. Joe, you mentioned the turnover. We've talked to some of these former DFCS workers. The turnover is because they can't do it. They can't be a part of this child trafficking system. And so they go, this is terrible. And they even know that they're going to, good luck ever getting a government job again, because the worst thing you can do when you're trying to get a government job is show that you've quit your last one. But, and especially when you don't get a good recommendation when you leave, they say, oh, you are underperforming. Underperforming, by the way, means not trafficking enough children. We actually spoke with one who might be coming forward publicly very soon, but who told us that they were flat out told, and this was DFCS in Georgia, they were told, if a child is placed for adoption and is taken out of the foster care system and you don't already have a child for that foster care, you are up to replace them with that foster home. You are up for being considered for being fired. It is a soul crushing system. And so the ones who stay in it,
Jennifer Williams.
Yeah.
She comes
yes,
forward
that's
to
what
say
happened to
that
Jennifer.
I've seen something bad happen here, and I'm telling you, this kid was not abused. And what do? They take her respite home
You're out of the
care
system.
away
Yep.
from her.
Right.
She has been doing this for 13 years. She dedicated her life to helping foster kids, and they booted her out of the system. She has a safe home. She has a good home. She has a loving home. But no, she's not allowed to be a respite care home anymore because she spoke out against the system. It's wrong.
Yeah, if they were not taking children from, if they were only taking children from homes that there was actual abuse present, there would be no problem finding enough foster families. There would be no problem with the amount of resources they have. The reason they're having a hard time meeting the supply is because they're feeding artificial demand by literally trafficking children from innocent parents. That's what's happening here. In the comments, someone, thank you for bringing that up, Janelle, I think, who said the judges are part of the problem, making bad decision. And she had said earlier that they need an education. Janelle, we've actually looked at some of these transcripts from these cases. They're in on it too, in many cases. We have seen with the Hernandez family, the judge there, Heather Dunn, she ignored the testimony, actually would refuse to allow the testimony of two medical specialists who said that all of Amelia Hernandez's injuries were the result of a chronic illness and had nothing to do with abuse. She would refuse to listen to them. And instead, she took the testimony of the child abuse physician who brought no paperwork, who had no idea what osteogenesis imperfecta or neonatal rickets even were. Those are the two things that she was suspected of having. One of the two things she was suspected of having, had no idea what they were. And his only testimony when asked, how do you know this is abuse? He said, when you see these kinds of injuries, statistically, they tend to be abuse. And when the parents' lawyer said, what is your source of that statistic? He said, you can look it up on the internet. The judge heard that.
Oh my God, I know.
And
I
heard the
it.
testimony of medical professionals and said, I refuse to listen to you. We're taking this in. Now, the interesting thing about this, for those who are hearing this and saying all hope is lost, this is the worst thing ever, I want to turn off YouTube and never hear about anything again. Here's where we won there. Heather Dunn was one of the biggest adversaries to the Hernandez family up until that point. Then she received thousands of emails from our supporters once they found out about this. And in the next hearing, she inexplicably made a 180-degree turn and allowed the children to stay with family, with the aunt and uncle,
brother-in-law,
and said, my hands are tied. I cannot give your children back to you because you have pending criminal charges. But as soon as those are dropped, I will be happy to end all of this and allow the kids to come back to you and allow full reunification. But I can't in the meantime. She went from not allowing medical professionals to give testimony that said that there was absolutely nothing wrong with Emma to turning completely around. And it was because she was called out by thousands of people. These
Spike,
are not.
Spike,
go ahead.
Hold that for 1 second. I just want to put
Yeah,
something up, and I just want to share this, Valerie. I'm sorry this is so triggering. I'm going to hit like and exit. And Valerie,
And I get
I'm
that.
sorry.
I get it.
You're probably not alone. As I said at the top of the show, this is probably going to be a very challenging conversation, and I'm sorry if we're triggering, if this is too uncomfortable. I respect your decision. But, so Spike, you really touched on something that really gets to the heart of what excites me about this conversation is, your email campaign made a positive impact for the Hernandez family.
Yep.
Let's talk about, we know there's a problem. We know that it's bigger than us, but where can we fix it and what can we do to help? How can we as advocates get on board?
Well, I can tell you the first thing you do is if you go to youarethepower.net and sign up to become a member today, that would certainly help because when you become a member of You Are the Power, and we have a free membership, so this is not, we're not trying to solicit money. If you want to make a donation, that's fine. More importantly, we want you to be a part of this. When you become a member of You Are the Power, you get access to our activist network. You get notified of our causes before anyone else does. We are about to unroll a mobile app later this year that will allow you to get real-time push notifications to your phone as soon as a new cause drops, and you can get involved. And we also provide free training to all of our members on how to become more effective activists. But when you become a member of You Are the Power, the next thing that you can do is you can actually go to our cause pages, and all of the information is there about these causes and what you can do to help. So for the Timms family, or for the Sullivan family, it's youarethepower.net/Sullivan. For the Timms family, it's youarethepower.net/Timms, TIMMS. For the Hernandez family, it's youarethepower.net/Hernandez. And we even, in all of those cases, and for the Sanders family, which is actually in Texas, but they're going through this as well, it's youarethepower.net/Sanders. And in that, we have all the details. We have a list of the officials that you can contact. And then we have a wording template. If you scroll down, you can see we actually have a wording template that you can use. You can copy and paste it and personalize it with your information to contact these people. and reach out to them. So you don't even have to come up with your own wording or anything like that. We've already got all the wording there that you can use. And we have found that when we get hundreds and thousands of people to reach out to these people, we very often they back off and do the right thing, or it opens up the opportunity for us to start talking with them in back channels, and then get them to do the right thing. We've done this with many other types of cases. Like I had mentioned before, we were dealing with police and city councils threatening to have people arrested for feeding people. We did a pressure campaign on that, and in two of the three cities, they just backed off. In the third city, they reached out to us and said, "Hey, why are you sicking all this people on us?" And we said, "Because you're trying to arrest people for feeding each other." And we had a really nice conversation with them, and then they backed off and did the right thing. You would be shocked to find out, with just even a few dozen or a couple hundred people reaching out to these officials, how quickly they'll turn around, because they're not used to this kind of pressure. They are usually doing this with no one the wiser, that even their own neighbor doesn't know what's happening. Suddenly, when there's people coming from all over their state, all over their country, from other countries saying, "I know what you're doing. It is terrible. It's horrific. Stop doing it." And they're seeing their names all over social media. Yep. Suddenly they want to be the good guy.
It's the sanitizing power of sunlight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every official does things based on expediency. It is, without the exposure, it is politically expedient. If you work in this system and you don't want to just quit and give up, the most politically expedient thing that you can do is to just, okay, fine, I'll rubber stamp and say abuse and pass it along to them and pray to God that they don't also say abuse like I just did. And of course, every single person down the line is doing the same thing. When you suddenly have hundreds and thousands of people calling them out by name publicly, suddenly it's politically expedient to say, "Listen, guys, we got to do the right thing here." And I believe that many of the officials we reach out to are probably, whether they'll ever admit it or not, they're probably sighing and saying, "Finally, someone's paying attention to this, and I can do the right thing."
And Spike, I just want to make it clear, and Ryan addressed this on Megan's show this morning, and if anybody in the audience has not watched Megan's show this morning about the devil went down to Georgia, we are talking a lot about Georgia. You mentioned a family in Texas.
Yeah.
You are the power does not have geographic limits. Is that correct?
The United States. As for now, we're actually working on opening chapters in other countries. But for right now, our geographical limitation is the United States. And you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to get involved in this. We are not a political party. We are a nonprofit that is trying to do good by helping people who are being harmed. And that transcends political barriers or borders and everything else. Right now, we're focused on the U.S. But, like I said, we're actually working to make this international, because anywhere that a human being is not being treated by another human being, that needs to end.
Amazing.
Sure.
It's true.
And so,
Spike, your organization has been so amazing. Like I've seen a lot of organizations like try to pop up to try to help parents in this situation. I've never seen one yet make the kind of inroads that you've already made. So I just want to say congratulations on
I almost cried when you said that, because I
it's true. It's been 20 years, Spike. It's 20 years, and I saw you, and I saw what is happening and how organized you are, and it was like, this is like nothing I've ever seen before. This is an organization I would put my name behind. No doubt about it. So those of you out there, if you're even considering not signing up, please go and do it right now. Get the free newsletter, sign up for free, volunteer in your state. I talked to Ryan about that today, about how people can volunteer to make phone calls. They can volunteer to send emails. And I want you to know I'm available. So if you need me to do anything for you, I'm there. I want to do it.
Thank you.
I can see that this is helping. It helped the Hernandez family, definitely. We're going to do a calling campaign on my show. I do action streams where everybody is calling at the same time together, and, causing our elected officials to run around for a day, because you know what? That's our job. That's their job. Their job is to answer our calls and do our bidding. Do my bidding. That's what I tell them. I neglect. Great.
Oh, sorry. I neglected to mention we have one other one specifically for Georgia, because we've decided we're going to take this straight to Governor Brian Kemp. He can put an end to this by firing Candace. Is it Brochi?
Candace Brochi.
He needs to fire Candace Brochi.
And I found out today from Ryan that she worked on his campaign. So
Yeah.
again,
She's a
it's
political
like
hack.
the
She has no idea
cronies
what
and
she's doing.
the cronyism. And I saw her at Senator Ossoff's meeting, and no, she shouldn't be there. I'm sorry. Get rid
No.
of her. It's enough. We need people who care about kids, who care about the Constitution, who care about families' rights, parents' rights. Not Candace Brochi, who clearly has lost 1,700 kids since she's been in charge of DFCS in Georgia. 1,700. Imagine that number. Imagine it.
And Megan's not talking about the kids who have been trafficked. She's talking about the kids who were taken and they have no idea where they are.
By the state. They're supposed to be in state custody and they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And many of these
Imagine
kids
being the parents of those kids. Imagine, Spike.
and many of
That
these
is so
kids
dystopian.
are at an age where they're actually graduated out of the system. So they just stopped looking because, well, they're 18 now, so it doesn't matter. We don't know where they are. They could be slaves in another country. They could be, who knows what they got. Like, we have no idea what could be happening.
But the U.S. Marshals, I reported on this a couple of years ago. So the U.S. Marshals, which is one of our greatest assets in law enforcement, they entered the sex trafficking fight a couple of years ago. And I started, I think it was around 2014, 2015, I started reporting on that. Well, their very first sex trafficking sting that they had with this new U.S. Marshals unit, 60%, and I interviewed somebody from the unit, 60% of the kids they found and rescued in sex trafficking organizations were from foster care. 60%. That number is so insane. And we really should lean on our law enforcement like the U.S. Marshals, who are incredibly dedicated and trained for this sort of thing. Like, sick the U.S. Marshals on them, because they will find them. In Missouri, they lost 1,000 kids in Missouri, 1,000 out of DCF. And the U.S. Marshals, they went after them and they found almost all of them. And guess what? Again, same thing. The majority of them were in sex trafficking. And whether they go missing because they ran away or whether they go missing because they were taken does not matter. The state has the responsibility to keep these kids safe, and they have failed at
They took them from their parents.
Megan, if you don't pay attention to him, the I-4 corridor is it gets talked about every 4 years because it really separates the blue part of Florida, South Florida, from the red part of Florida up through the Panhandle. And the I-4 corridor really decides where Florida goes politically. The I-4 corridor connects Tampa and St. Petersburg to Daytona Beach, and Orlando sits in the middle. Between Tampa and Orlando is Polk County, Lakeland. The sheriff there is Grady Judd. And Grady Judd is all over this. The I-4 corridor is considered the epicenter of child sex trafficking in the South and in the state of Florida. And Grady Judd does a sting almost monthly. He has a press conference, and the people that he pulls in are, they're our neighbors, and but he has no sympathy for them at all. This is such an important thing for him.
Well, thank God somebody's looking into it.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying thing where people don't want to hear you say child sex trafficking,
Yeah.
And when we implicate our own government in the complacency, and it's not that I think the government is selling kids, right? Because I don't. I think that's a whole other thing. I think the government is complacent enough that predators know that those children are not being watched. Those children in foster care and in those group homes, they have no supervision, really. They don't have people who love them. They don't have their parents. They don't have their grandparents.
Yeah.
And do you know how many cases I have worked on where CPS or DCF, whatever you call it in your state, has removed children from parents and totally ignored their grandparents? I have grandparents in my inbox every damn week saying they took my grandchildren and will not even consider me as a placement for them.
in the case of Jocelyn Sanders in Texas, and without going into the whole story, they took her son from her because she didn't want to give him clindamycin for a low-level infection. And so she sought a second opinion. She got it. They prescribed him to Bactrim that same day. The following day, her child was stolen, and that was back in December. She is confined to a wheelchair because of either an injury or disability that she has. Her father, Jason, is her ADA companion. She helps him get around, or he helps her get around. When she sees her kid Josiah, when they do allow him to visit her, or allow her to visit him, after they almost killed him in the hospital by giving him clindamycin and causing him to need a PICC line and a feeding tube and everything else. After that happened, she's only allowed to see him herself, even though she can barely get around herself. Jason, the grandfather, who is not suspected or even has had anything hinted of him being having done anything wrong, he's not allowed to attend with her. She gave them a list of 7 loved ones, family and friends, who were willing to take Josiah as foster families. And Dallas CPS said, they all said they didn't want to. And when she followed up with them, they said, actually, we never contacted any of them. This is who we're dealing with here.
They did that to the Hernandezes.
They did that with the Hernandezes too.
People. They had 20 people on a list that were ready and able to take those girls, and they never bothered to call any of them. This is where I lose it. This is where I lose it on these people. Why would you opt for strangers over family or friends? And anyway, it is the law that you must go to family first. There is a law that Donald Trump signed into law as president called the Family First Act, and they have been ignoring it ever since. They have not been obeying the law, and it drives me crazy. Oh God. Ruby says too much shouting for me. No kidding. This topic makes me shout, Ruby. You and I know each other well. You know I get shouty when I'm upset, and it does. Megan, it upsets me. It gets me ragey.
I warned everybody. I put it in. I said it. You won't have to wait long to hear how Megan candidly feels about something, right? I warned everybody.
I'm gonna have to put. I'm gonna have to put on my ASMR voice. Okay, listen, chat.
Excuse me, Attorney Shapiro. Calm.
I want to address Dean's question in the comments. I guess he came on later on and he said, "Why is this being called child trafficking?" So this is an act of taking children from parents who did nothing wrong and giving them to other people who are not their parents. It is being done against the rules and the law. They're actually violating their own procedures, which means they're doing it illegally, and it's being done for a profit motive. So children are being taken illegally for money. It's child trafficking. It's being done under the color of law, but even according to their own procedures and rules, it is a form of child trafficking and should be treated as such. I didn't get a chance to, I started talking about it, but I neglected to mention the website. If you go to youarethepower.net/GA for Georgia, we are trying to reach out directly to Governor Kemp. We would like for him to fire Candace Brochi and for him to order immediate independent reviews into these cases with these families. We would also like to sit down with him and have a conversation about the procedural problems within the system that are causing this to happen, and how instead of this happening under his watch and him doing nothing, he can be known as the governor who put an end to it at the structural level and created a standard that can go to all the other states, so that not only can we save thousands of people, children and parents in Georgia, but millions more across the country. So if you want to help with that, go to youarethepower.net/GA, like Georgia.
I also, the definition of human trafficking, by the way, the definition is defined by the United Nations as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, and or receipt, kidnapping of a child for the purpose of slavery, forced labor, and exploitation. And I would make the argument that these kids are in forced labor because they're being taken from their parents, puts them into a system with the government where their just purpose for being actually generates money. So they actually don't have to do anything. They don't have to actually be at a sewing machine doing forced labor. Their physical presence, their body represents a dollar sign, a dollar amount. Okay, that is child trafficking, no matter how you label it and whatever kind of, smiley face you try to put on it, it is what it is. There is a federal dollar amount hanging over the heads of each child.
A big one.
A big one. And it gets released every time Child Services comes and they pick up a child from your house and they transfer that child to somebody else's house. And by the way, they will often take them across state lines as well. And that is, by definition, human trafficking. When you take them from one state, you take them across state lines to another state, that's child trafficking. The fact that our government is doing it gives them some veneer of legitimacy, but let me tell you, it is not legitimate. Not when you are violating constitutional rights in order to take them. These parents are not getting due process. Due process has been denied in almost every single one of these cases I've covered. The Cynthia Absug case, the due process violations there would make a lawyer, a first-year law student choke. That there's so many due process violations in that case. For one, she never got an evidentiary hearing. She was supposed to get an immediate 72-hour evidentiary hearing after they took her son. It was 60 days before she got to even see him, and a year and a half before she had the first evidentiary hearing, which by that time she didn't show up for because she was sure that these people were trying to destroy her. So, how do you tell somebody, oh, your evidentiary hearing you were supposed to have in 72 hours, you don't get one for a year and a half? What? So it's, our system is not being followed. Our system of checks and balances that we're supposed to have, the due process you're supposed to be able to have, there's deadlines of things. None of that's being followed.
None of it. Yeah.
None of it. And it's only these few cases where Spike finds out about it, or I find out about it, and we tell you about it, that you hear about it. But the majority of these cases are going unreported. That's the scary part. That's the scary part. It's happening so much more than you would even imagine.
They're scared of the stigma.
Yeah.
They're scared of the stigma. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Megan, I know that we're going to lose you shortly. I know that you've got your own family to take care of, and
I have to go.
appreciate
Apparently, my middle child was supposed to be making mashed potatoes. She says they're inedible, so I'm supposed to go and check on that.
Well, before you
somehow
go,
she ruined
though,
mashed
Megan,
potatoes.
Yeah. Before you go, I know that there has been at least some. You introduced me to the Hernandez family, and I understand that there is some positive movement there. Can you give us an update on what's going on with
Sure.
the family?
So luckily, the judge in the juvenile case, has ruled for reunification.
Yep.
However, there's still a very long uphill battle. For instance, they still have to go get specialist, evaluations of the baby, which DCF is not being cooperative with. I mean, they have to be there as well, and it's a whole thing. The most recent thing I heard today from Ryan, and maybe Spike has more of an update too, but Ryan told me that they have filed a motion for reconsideration of the bond agreements. And the bond agreements are really outrageous because Matt and Tucky have been separated as man and wife. They have been told they're not allowed to speak to each other, not on social media, not on text. They can't live together. So that means Tucky is homeless. She is living on the goodwill of people who know her for all this time. I've never heard of this. Spike, are you from Georgia? Where do you live, Spike?
I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, so I'm right
So
across the line there.
Okay, you're right across the line. I am not familiar with Georgia, but I have never heard of any bond agreement, even when husband and wife are both accused of the same thing. I've never heard of a bond requirement where they can't live together anymore. Remember, when you're getting married and it says, "Let no man put asunder." Right? That's in the damn thing. It's right there. What God has joined, let no man put asunder.
Yeah.
And the state is they're supposed to respect that. Well, Matt and Tucky have been forced to live separately since this happened. And so that motion to reconsider has been put in. I don't even know if the initial ruling was legal. I feel like this could be a federal lawsuit on a lot of levels, but that's happening soon. I think he said when is it happening? May?
I think
believe
it's
May.
later this month, isn't it?
This month. Okay.
Yeah, March. Oh, it's in the comments. March 21st. Yes, thank you,
March
thank you, Manny.
21st. Okay, so that's coming up next week. Oh my gosh. So we will be waiting with bated breath to
Yep.
find out if Matt and Tucky have been granted the right to live together. I cannot tell you how many couples I have covered who have gone through this situation with DCF and they have lost their marriages because of it, because DCF has told them you can have your kids back if you get a divorce.
You know,
Should the state ever be involved in breaking up families?
yeah. You know, Megan, before we went live, Spike and I were talking about the incredible strength on display by so many of these couples. You know, they are fighting a fight that would just have me absolutely sidelined. You know, I don't know how I would stand on my own 2 feet. And again, my kids are grown. You know, I mean, look at these babies. If those
I would lose my
if
mind.
those
I
little
would go
faces
homicidal.
got
I'm telling
taken,
you.
right.
Gary
But these
Plushie, it's a
parents,
reason we celebrate Gary Plushie, anniversary every March. It happened a couple
yeah,
days ago because I'd lose
yeah,
my damn mind. And there are parents who would not go the peaceful route. There are parents who would go
yeah,
down fighting for this. And
yeah,
if we are not careful, and if our government is not careful, there will be 1,000 more Gary Plushies. Is that what you want?
yeah,
No, you
yeah,
don't. You want people to have faith in our institutions that have the power to take our liberty. You want us to have faith in those institutions because if we don't, it is only a matter of time until the people will take matters into their own hands, which I never ever suggest, but you could see that it is coming if
It's
you
going to
don't
happen.
stop this.
Would
It
you
is
like to
going to
explain who
happen.
Gary Pleshy is?
Oh,
Yeah,
Gary Plushie is the best. Gary
Yeah.
Plushie, he
That
got
video is
180 days.
all over.
180 days
Yeah,
probation is what you have to know about
yeah,
this. But Gary Plushie was
yeah.
a father whose son was SA'd, because YouTube doesn't let us say that,
By
by a
his
man who
karate instructor, right?
he waited in the
Yeah,
airport as they were, moving this man from one place to another, and he brought a gun and he took care of it himself. And he got 180 days probation.
Yeah,
it was.
he got
It
no,
was
he
a
got
five,
no
I
jail
think it
time.
was a
He got no jail
5-year
time, and I think he had to
suspended
No
do
jail
sentence.
time.
he had to do 100 hours of
300
community
hours
service.
community
100
They
hours of
really
community
they really
service.
beat him up for that. Yeah,
That jury
they
was like, sir, we're going to teach you a
you
lesson.
bad boy, you're gonna have to get the roughest slap on the wrist we can possibly
I
give you.
heard of another one like that who would beat his child's abuser to death. And I think he was given
Yeah,
7 months probation. And that's what juries should do. At some
yeah,
point, if the government has not protected you,
Jury
and the
nullification. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just
yeah,
you get to a point where it's like, well, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, and that's the way it's going to
yeah,
go. And
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want that for
No,
this
that's not the
country.
optimal. Yeah.
no.
I want
Yeah.
our country to go back.
Vigilantism is not the answer,
No, I want
but
us to go back to the rule of law where the law matters. And I love the law. And I want to see our lawmakers follow it. And they
yeah,
are not doing that. They are violating constitutional rights every day. And can I give a shout out to Sean McMillan and his YouTube channel? His YouTube channel is Caps and Stems Law. Please go and subscribe to Sean McMillan because he sues CPS every single day. And Spike, you need to get in touch with him
Yeah, I
to
do.
see if there's anything happening in California. You need to know about Sean McMillan, and I will put you two in touch. Sean is putting his depositions of these social workers up on YouTube every night for us to watch and to learn from him. He sues them every day under 1983 federal statutes for constitutional violations of 4th and 14th Amendment rights. And what he is doing is legendary. It is legendary and it's necessary. He wins millions and millions against the state for taking the constitutional rights of parents, and everybody needs to go and show him some love because it really is an effort of love. He's not making tons of money doing this because he puts so much of his time into these cases, but it is something that needs to be done. All right, I got to go. I love you guys.
All right.
It was great meeting you,
Megan,
Megan.
thank you so much. Great
All right,
having
see
you
you
on
later.
tonight and great being with you this morning.
And I would like to real quick, sorry, Dr. Joe,
Yeah.
I'd like to apologize because I've seen it in the chat. So the youarethepower.net/GA is not live yet. I was mistaken. It will be live sometime tomorrow. So I'm sorry for letting the cat out of the bag before it was ready. Those other ones for youarethepower.net/Sullivan and /Tims and /Hernandez, those are up. /GA will be up at some point tomorrow. I'll actually be announcing it on my social media, hopefully tomorrow, maybe the day after. But I do apologize to those who went on. Thank you for being a part of that. And if you sign up as a member, you'll find out more when that comes out.
And where can we follow you on social media?
I'm all over. So if you look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me pretty easily. I think this is on YouTube. So I am, if you go to either youtube.com/literally Spike Cohen, or if you look for @literally Spike Cohen, or even just Spike Cohen, I should come up. And I'm there on YouTube. On X, I am @real Spike Cohen. And on everything else, if you just look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me. I'm on there. I'm pretty loud. I'm pretty prominent, or I shouldn't say prominent. It's not hard to find me. I'm all.
You're available. You're fine.
I'm available. I'm very available.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, I appreciate that you were, so reachable and generous with offering to join us tonight. So Megan was able to give us an update on the Hernandez family. Can you just kind of give us a status report on the Timms family and on the Sullivan family?
Sure. So the last thing that happened with the Timms family, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of movement there most recently. They have, at their most recent hearing, it was more of the same. They are allowing for there to be testing of their child Jameson to see if he does indeed have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. A doctor already said he had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and DFCS workers were present when he said it.
And that doctor was at Boston Children's Hospital.
Boston Children's Hospital, one of the top pediatric specialists for children with these types of conditions, said in front of DFCS workers, this child has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and so does Carrie, and that's why you had so many complications with the pregnancy. You both have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
And for context, Boston Children's Hospital is not only considered the top, if not, at worst, a top 3 pediatric hospital in the country, perhaps in the world, and is also where Dr. Eli Neuberger made his entire academic career and led a training program for almost 2 decades. So, that Boston Children's Hospital.
Yeah, that
part of the
Boston
Harvard
Children's
healthcare program. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, and also, while this is up, that reminds me, on Facebook, TikTok, I almost said Twitter, X, and Instagram, @YATP official is the official social media for You Are the Power. So you can follow me at Spike Cohen, and you can follow them. You can follow my organization @YATP official for You Are the Power. So that's the most recent with the Timms. As you know, the most recent with the Sullivans is that the judge has ordered non-reunification, which is absolutely insane. Every bit of evidence. Right now, Corey Sullivan has pending charges, has not officially been charged with abuse. And there's a very simple reason for that. There's no evidence that he abused anyone. And in fact, every bit of evidence they have shows that he's completely innocent and the government is guilty. And so they're just not charging him. They're just letting those pending charges sit over him like a Damocles sword. And in the meantime, the judge is using that as an excuse to order non-reunification and potentially have the kids put up for adoption without him even having his day in court. And that would mean if that happens, they will, Corey and Diana Sullivan will have to pay $2,000 a month in child support, not to the adoptive parents, but to the government. And they will, in that case, never see their children again.
And this is a couple that didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, let's start a family, and boom, they've got 3 kids.
No, no. No, they had to use IVF for all 3 of their kids. They first they had Arabella, and then when she was, I believe, 2 years old, they decided to try again, and they spent between Arabella and then when Amelia and Christian were born, they were twins. When they were born, they basically spent their entire life savings to have a family, and now they are having to, beg and borrow and spend every penny they have to fight these charges, and are now being told, we're going to take your kids from you and you're going to have to pay us for it, thousands of dollars a month. It is beyond infuriating, which is why I make a point when I talk about these things of saying we have a track record of getting justice for people who are being harmed by their governments. And if you want to help, you can be a part of You Are the Power, and we will do this. I don't just want you to be angry. I want you to be on the side of fixing this, and we can do this together. Someone earlier on asked what You Are the Power means, why we call it You Are the Power. I started You Are the Power, and I wanted to call it You Are the Power. It's a phrase I've been saying for about 5 years now. And what it means is just that. You have so much more power than you think you do. You often, all of us, we hear of all this corruption. We hear of all of this, double dealings and all these people's lives being destroyed. And we go, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm just one person. Who am I against all of this?
Yeah.
Together, there is nothing that can stop us. And I have been for the last 2 years, almost 2 years, actually over 2 years, because we started this as a proof of concept back in 21. So for almost 3 years now, I have been going around and seeing firsthand how corrupt government officials who were never going to bend, never going to yield, they yield and they bend when enough people tell them to. So we can fix this. This family can be back together. This nightmare can end. It can happen with your help.
And Spike, that's one of the things that when I started the YouTube channel in November, December, I truly had no idea where it would lead. But one of the things that I decided even before posting my first video was that I was going to call the members of the audience the advocates, because I had an OBGYN career. I had a brain injury. I lost my ability to practice clinically. I went back to business school, and I spent many of the last 15, 20 years managing quality of outcomes and patient safety in hospital settings. And, I always used to encourage my physicians, my nurses, my respiratory therapists, my social workers, be an advocate for the patient. We don't have the nuclear family that I grew up with. I was very blessed to have a family that was very tight. My wife, her family, they're Greeks, they're first generation Americans. You talk about the village pulling together, right? Again, that's our experience, but that's not the common experience. So we need people in hospitals to advocate for patients. We need people in this community of advocates in the audience to advocate, number one, for themselves, number two, for their loved ones, and then number three, for others as well. Because again, when you are ill, you're not yourself. I will tell you that in the 2 years that it took me to recover from my brain injury, I was not in charge of the family like I feel that. I know it's very patriarchal. It's very, you call me misogynistic if you want to.
And
but
true,
I believe
but yes.
that I was, I think that husbands and dads are providers, right? And I wasn't able to do that, right? So I know personally that if I didn't have my wife advocating for me, if I didn't have my extended family advocating for me, I would not be where I am today, Spike. So that's why I encourage this audience. You referenced it. It's so much easier to say, I'm a victim, I can't do anything. But when we find that power inside ourselves to stand up and do the right thing, to say what's uncomfortable, just like we've talked about tonight. We've talked about some really uncomfortable things. But they have to be said. And if
Yeah.
not me, then who? Right?
Exactly.
And when we find that strength, we can move mountains.
We can move everything. I said that for a very long time, ever since my early teens or my late teens. I started my first business when I was 16. And so I was very much on the whole, don't be a victim. You got to take charge of your own life or whatever. It never really hit home until 2014 when I woke up and the right side of my body was going numb. And about 3 weeks later, I was being told that I probably had multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
That began a journey, a 2-year journey of me, first of all, mourning the fact that I now was dealing almost certainly, and 2 years later, I was officially diagnosed with MS, but dealing with the fact that I had reached a point in my life due to no fault of my own, with something that could end up putting me in a wheelchair. I could go blind. I could lose my ability to be able to use my arm. Everything. It's neurological, affects everything. You have a brain injury. Neurology, right? So you know what this stuff is, and having to deal with that, and then having to deal with the fact that all that talk about not being a victim. Now I got a real thing that I can pretend I'm victimized by, and I spent a few months pretending to be a victim until I realized, even before this, you hated your life. You were spending all your time working and no time actually taking stock of your purpose. You were 100 pounds. This was me. You were 100 pounds overweight. You were miserable. And then this thing hit you and you're now being forced to deal with your life. Yep. And so I got on a really good diet and exercise regimen, supplementation. Once I got my diagnosis, they were able to get me on a really good disease modifying therapy. I've been in remission for going on 7 years now. And looking back, being diagnosed with MS, and it took me a long time to say this, it was one of the greatest blessings that ever happened in my life, because it forced me to realize life is not happening to you. Life is something that is incredibly precious, something that statistically should have never happened to you. And here you are living it. You can choose what that looks like. And so it's easy for me to look at a family that is being torn to hell for absolutely no reason. But I know the truth is that I'm not just going to look at them and say, these poor people, what a terrible thing. I feel bad about that anyway, and go back on my phone. I'm instead going to say, this is a terrible thing. It is being done to them by human beings. Their minds can be changed. We are going to work together to change their minds and put this nightmare behind this family. That is what You Are the Power is about. And that is what the community that we're building is about.
Very inspiring, Spike. And, I frequently say, I don't like how I got here, but I love where I am in my life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I was very blessed. I got to deliver about 3,000 babies in my career before my career was taken from me by an accident, but just because I couldn't deliver babies or do hysterectomies anymore didn't mean that I stopped being Dr. Corcoran. And so I've had to find new ways of being Dr. Corcoran that didn't involve clinical care. And, it's a challenge, but, I look at my wife's beautiful face, and I look at the face of my kids, and when they're not sticking their tongues out at me, they're pretty sweet kids, and they're pretty inspiring too. So, I understand how people curl up in a ball and feel sorry for themselves. I do. Because I too, I sat on the couch and felt sorry for myself. But
me too.
At the end of the day, that wasn't who my parents raised, and it wasn't who my family, my immediate family needed. And so it's been a wonderful ride. Again, don't like how I got here, but love where I am.
Absolutely. So. And I know I've already had some of these families in these cases and also in other causes we worked on in the past, who many of the people that we've helped in the past have gotten involved in You Are the Power. And so I'm not sure if based on, some of them, it was something like, for example, they were feeding people and they were told, we're going to arrest you. And we got involved and they weren't arrested and they can now feed people. So it wasn't quite it was a scary thing for them, but it wasn't quite the same as having their family torn apart, like what's happening here. Yeah. But many of those people have said, I'm glad, I don't very much like what you said. I'm not glad how that I found out about You Are the Power, but I'm glad that I have, because I want to help people that are going through what I've gone through, and I don't want it to ever happen again. And so, what we're finding is the people that we've helped with causes, very often, once they've had a chance to take stock of everything and deal with the aftermath, once we finally, gotten them the justice they deserve, many of them join us to help others so that we can stop this from happening to other people as well. I hate that that's what had them find out about our activism. And frankly, I hate that we have to do this activism. We shouldn't have to tell other human beings, hey, stop treating people like pests or, like dollar signs. Treat them like human beings, like you would someone you care about. We shouldn't have to say that. But if we have to say it, we're going to say it.
Yeah. I had a patient who really summed it up nicely. She said, I have a problem I need you to help me with, right? So take care of the problem. Keep me safe. And if it's not too much trouble, could you be nice to me too? And that really kind of sums up what I think the should be the model for the human condition. But so you raised an interesting point again, and I've been dying to ask you this. Sure. In the conversation 2 Thursdays ago with Stephanie Spurgeon, she is out of jail and she is actually now paying it forward. She is working as a paralegal for the Florida Innocence Project. Florida Innocence Project was one of 3 organizations, much like your own, that saw a wrong and helped to fix it, right? So the Innocence Project of Florida, the Exoneration Project out of Chicago, and a forensic studies, and it's I'm blanking on the name, but it's out of Madison, Wisconsin. The 3 organizations said, this is not right. We're going to help make it right.
Yeah.
My question to you is, you must get inundated with opportunities, requests, begs to get involved.
Yes.
How do you decide who makes the cut? How do you choose from so many people that could benefit?
So this is where support from our advocates, from our membership, is so crucial. So we actually have a team whose job it is to take in the fire hydrant being pointed at us. That is the high level of causes that are being brought to our attention, both by the people that it's actually happening to and from their friends or someone that just saw it on the news or whatever. We get literally hundreds of them every month, and it's their job to go through, sift through them and see, is this something that's already been resolved or is it something that we can help on? Because a lot of people will bring stuff to our attention. It's already been dealt with. It's already been resolved. It's a great story to talk about, but there's nothing we can do. And is it true? That's another, like I said, we spend so much time finding out if these things are true. And then we often find cases where, the government's acting out of line with this person, but this person's also like a menace to the community. And if we come in and try to help them, everyone else in the community is going to turn around and go, why the hell are you helping this guy? We all hate him. He's terrible. We wish he'd leave. And so we look for people that not necessarily the most sympathetic characters ever, but just someone who hasn't created enemies everywhere they go. Once we have done that, then it comes down to, do we have the resources to take this on in the area that it's in? And thankfully, as our donor base grows, that answer, we increasingly don't have to ask that question, and we're able to just take on the cause. And we're reaching a point where we can take on several of these causes at the same time. With the more resources that we have, the more that we are able to take on more causes, vet more causes, because frankly, we aren't able to look like we'd like to at every cause that's brought to our attention. And I'm not sure if we'd ever reach a point where we can, but the more resources we have to be able to hire more people on full time to do this work, which is very difficult, very tedious work of basically building a case, getting the evidence, getting in this case, the medical history, and in other cases, getting the information about the zoning and about the background of that story and so forth. But, getting all the information we need to determine, is this true? Is this someone that we can actually build a cause around? Or build a movement around, and then do we have the resources in place to do so? Every dollar we receive in donations allows us to do more of that. Now, I did not come here to solicit donations. I came here to solicit people to roll up their sleeves and help us get work done. But the reality is, the more resources we have, the more of these causes we can vet and then hopefully take on and get justice for.
And I will tell you, Spike, I have always found it easy to stroke a check. But as the older I get, the more I am committed to the model of I will give you my sweat equity before I give you my money, because money can be wasted.
Good.
Sweat
Yes.
equity is project specific, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So listen, anyone in the community of advocates that wants to get involved, if listen, you Are the Power has a free membership, but if you want to, get involved. Get involved. Be a voice. Write an email. With the templates, you couldn't have made it any easier, right? But but get involved. Help out somebody. But it's interesting because one of the roles that I promised myself early on in my post-clinical career was I wanted nothing to do with being an expert witness, because I know as an obstetrician, I know how difficult it is to make the right decision. You can't make the right decision 99% of the time. You've got to get it right every single time. And you never have 100% of the information that you need, right? So I didn't want to sit in judgment on, hey, well, you could have made this decision, but so I wanted nothing to do with it. Why did I get involved with the Kowalski case? It was really a couple of different factors. One is I wasn't asked to look at medical decision making. This was about where the system, the organization, fell short. Number two, I met Greg Anderson, and here's a guy who literally sold his home so that he could continue to fund the legal process to try to get the Kowalskis their day in court, right?
Yeah.
And the third thing is the Kowalskis. You meet them, they're an American success story. An immigrant mom, a firefighter dad, two kids that are just as normal and wonderful as my own kids. They are just fantastic. They're a fantastic family, and they were put through hell. They lost the matriarch of the family, who will never be back no matter what we do. But what are they doing? What was the first thing that Maya said when she came out of the courtroom on verdict day? I feel like I've been heard. It wasn't, what am I going to buy? It's, I feel that I've been heard. And what have they already committed to doing, Spike, is to pay it forward, to build a family foundation that will help others in a similar situation.
Yeah.
How can you not love that family? How can you not get behind what they're trying to do? And that's really who I think there's so many people in this community of advocates that are watching us now who are cut from the same cloth. And that's what I love about this channel.
There are two kinds of people that are faced with horrific trauma. And abuse, being abused, whether it's by the system, whether it's by a parent, whether it's however, being abused. There's the person who says, this terrible thing happened to me. I don't care if it happens to anyone else. Let it happen to someone else. I had to deal with it. And there's the person who says, that was the most horrific thing I went through. I will fight tooth and nail to stop anyone else from having to go through that.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's the correct answer to that. I understand the people who are so broken by their abuse that their response is the former, but the reality is when there is no better, and I have found some of the strongest advocates for ending various types of abuse are the people who have been through them, because they can say firsthand what it's like, and they don't care how difficult the fight is because they already went through it for themselves. And so it's 1,000 times easier to do it for someone else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And it's, we get very protective. I know that you're not a parent, but I will tell you that being a dad is one of the most powerful emotional experiences that I could imagine experiencing in my lifetime. And, listen, they talk about, I'd take a bullet for my kid. Hell, I'd take a lot worse than that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's how, once you've been through a devastating diagnosis, MS can be a devastating diagnosis.
Yes.
And at that young age, Spike, nobody would blame you if you had just crumbled, right? Because at 14, you don't have coping mechanisms, for God's sake.
No, in 2014,
Oh, 2014. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so
My
I was
pea-sized
30.
brain.
I was 32.
Yeah.
No, I was 16 when I started my first company. I was 30.
Yeah, sorry about it.
Yeah, no problem. I was 32 when I was diagnosed. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I might as well have been 4 when they told me. I was so,
Right?
it was
Right?
so disarming. And it was something
Yeah.
I had feared. I have a bit of a hypochondriac, and I would type in my symptoms, and they're like, yeah, MS. But I'd done that so many other times. I'm like, oh, I'm just, driving myself crazy for no reason. When they said it's probably MS, I crumbled,
Yeah.
and I crumbled for months.
Yeah.
And so I know that feeling of like total helplessness. What am I going to do? But I also know the feeling of saying, you know what? I'm still here, and I can fight this, and
Yeah.
whatever happens, I will be better off if I fight it. And in doing that, I discovered my
Yeah.
purpose, and it has been the best years of my life ever since.
You know, I will tell you that what paralyzed me, metaphorically speaking, was the fear that, as compromised as I felt in the moment, my fear was that that was as good as it was ever going to get. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And Spike, when I had that first day where, my cognitive function, my ability to think as I'd been fortunate enough to think most of my life, right? I mean, let's face it, you and I probably don't have, you and I have not spent a lot of time with an average IQ. You're a very bright man. I've been very fortunate to think pretty effectively. And that first day that I felt like my cognitive function was a little bit better.
Yeah.
Clouds were gone, sky was blue, right? That changed everything for me. So thank you so much for sharing your story about your own challenges. And I will tell you, it is because of the stories that show up in the comments and in the emails that audience members send to me. There are so many that support this channel and subscribe to this channel that share really personal stories of challenge.
Yeah.
That inspires me. I never imagined that I would share what I just shared, on the interweb, right? But
for the whole world to see. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And there's no taking it back, is there? But, but it's, but everybody faces challenges, and they may be bigger, they may be smaller, but they're all personal. And so, I'm just really inspired by your story, by the stories that I've heard from so many people that are tuned in right now. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, Spike. I'm hoping that this is not the only time that you and I get to have this conversation with this audience. I also anticipate that you and I will have many more conversations offline. Because I would like to find ways to help support you and your group's work, because I think it's just that important. Certainly the Timms family, the Hernandez family, the Sullivan family, and dozens of others feel that it's important. And again, one of the things that I set as an ideal for this community is that it comes from the creed that young Athenian Greek boys that were now citizens took. And that is that we will leave this city-state not as beautiful, but more beautiful than it was given to us. And I think that the work that you and your team do are very much aligned with that ethos. So thank you for what you're doing.
100% we are. And thank you for having me on. I would be happy to come on more in the future. And I'm definitely happy to have more conversations offline with you as well about this. My life's work is largely twofold. One is to help people who need it now, and 2 is to wake people up to the fact that we don't have to live this way. It never had to be this way. We are not powerless. This is not this inescapable Leviathan machine that we can do nothing to stop. It's human beings who forgot that they're supposed to respect us as individual human beings, and other human beings, us, who forgot that we were supposed to demand it from them. And when that happens, when that shifts and we start demanding that respect and they start giving it, everything changes. We are not just fixing problems, we're becoming more happy, more prosperous, more harmonious. Our communities are better. Everything is better when people are respecting each other as individual human beings. And that is, I call it the principle of human respect. It is the core ethos and mission of You Are the Power, is to spread and act upon it. And if that resonates with those of you in the audience who are hearing this, and if you want to help us help others, and to show people that we can respect each other as human beings and demand it from those who aren't doing it, then I invite you to join us at youarethepower.net. Dr. Joe, thank you again. It means everything to me to be on. I hope now I'm also considered a dear friend, and I've even joined the club that says how wonderful your hair is, which is, I mean, frankly, objectively true. But I'm happy to be on, and I look forward to being on next time. And thank you again for sharing this evening with me.
Spike, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure, and thank you very much. And I will look forward, as is the audience. We will all look forward to the next time you get to visit us and share an update, not only about the Sullivans, Tims, and Hernandez families, but of the work, the amazing work that you and your team are doing. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. All right, take care.
Thank you all for tuning in.
What an amazing gentleman. You know, it's fascinating, you know, whether it's I know I saw a lot of love in the comments for Grady Judd. You know, there's a guy that just is doing unbelievable work, and he's out there. He's having press conferences, and you know, people around the country know who Grady Judd is. But you know, Spike Cohen is a guy, and granted, he's all over social media. Maybe I'm the doofus that's been in a cave and just hasn't learned about him until very recently. But you know, it doesn't take long to look on social media and see all the good that Spike and Ryan and the other members at You Are the Power are doing, and what an incredible impact they are having on so many families, like the Hernandez family, the Sullivan family, the Tims family. And if you think about it, those families are in really almost, nobody would blame them if they felt helpless, if they felt like victims. You know, they are being accused of crimes and civil torts that never happened, right? There was the story this afternoon or this morning that Ryan shared that one of the child abuse specialists, one of the child abuse physicians, actually theorized that the dad drop kicked the baby. Think about it. Don't you need some evidence to support that? Maybe some bruising, maybe a witness, just to say that and not provide any data, any evidence, anything to support your opinion. It's not, maybe it's not an opinion, it's just a passing thought, for goodness sake. But that's the kind of unchecked power that Dr. Neuberger predicted almost 30 years ago, when the whole specialty was being postulated by leaders of the pediatric academia, right? So it's, again, at the top of the program, I lamented, quite candidly. I wasn't terribly excited about having this conversation, because I knew it would be difficult, and I knew it would be challenging to me as a dad, as a husband, as a human, as someone who gives a darn, keeping it family friendly, you know. And this was a very hard conversation, right up there with the interview with Stephanie, which, you know, really took me a day or two to get over. But you know what? Based on the comments that I've seen, I know that it really resonated with this group, and I'm really, really grateful for your investment, your involvement, your commitment to helping to leave this planet not as beautiful, but more beautiful than it's given to us. And Nancy D, unfortunately, this is not an isolated case. This is not just a knock against Georgia. Nancy D sees the problem. Thank you for your comment, Nancy. Sees the problem in Connecticut all the time. And it is a sad indictment on a very broken system. And we really need to find somebody in the political realm who has the fortitude, keeping it families friendly, who has the fortitude to stand up and say the difficult parts out loud, that the system is broken and we can do better. So thank you, Nancy, for bringing that. Sherry Ashby, welcome. Glad you joined us. Thank you for being here. And Kaz, member for 1 month. Thankful for these hard but needed conversations. Kaz, you said it. You said it exactly right. Again, this is not. Listen, I'd love to be talking about unicorns and rainbows, but this is the hard scrabble reality that that's out there. And so I'm glad that we can have these conversations out loud, and I'm glad that you're a part of it. So there you go. I can't wait to have Spike back on. Megan Fox, what a great friend. And yes, Spike, you are now a great friend as well. So thank you for joining my circle of friends and being a great guest tonight. And Megan Fox, can't say enough about your help getting this started. And to all of the moderators who have been going through an incredible amount of comments tonight. This was a very, very active chat group tonight. It's going to be interesting. I always go back and watch the shows the next day, and I don't watch the video part. I watch the comments, and I try to look for the comments that I didn't pick up on during the show, as I try to stay in the moment and provide you the best conversation that I can with the amazing guests that I have. But there's going to be a lot to read tomorrow. So I guess maybe it's going to be a 2-cup of coffee morning. But thank you for all that you do. Sally, great job managing the visuals and the graphics and pulling up the pictures and the social media posts and the websites. You did an amazing job staying in front of it and staying up with the conversation. But again, Gothic Brina, you're amazing, and thank you for all the work that you do day in, day out, whether we have a program or not. Advocates, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. I hope that between supporting You Are the Power and supporting the Innocence Project and the Exoneration Projects, I hope that you find some cause that resonates with you, that allows you to help to begin to advocate beyond your immediate circle. Again, advocating for yourself and being better at it and more effective at it and more confident in it, that's goal number 1. Then advocating for your loved ones. Because again, we don't necessarily live in the same neighborhood anymore, like 2 generations back, right? So we need to be able to care for those around us, right? But then we also need to be thinking about those outside our circle. And that's where leaders like Spike, leaders like Stephanie can help us find a cause that means something to you and start with sweat equity. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm very skeptical about sending people my money because too many charities spend 90% on advertising and 10% goes to the cause, right? And there are websites that will help you look at, where the money goes. Okay. So, but I am much more eager to provide sweat equity up front Let's see how the work really happens. Let's see what they really do with the resources that they have. If that's how you'd like to get started, Spike's laid it out for you tonight, right? Stephanie will be more than happy to help you get started providing sweat equity for the Innocence Project of Florida. So let's not sit still, right? Let's not sit still. We are at a very difficult time as a nation, as a community, as a world, and getting involved I don't think it's an option anymore. If we want to leave things more beautiful, not as beautiful, then we have to take action. And so I would like to continue to bring you people that are giving us opportunities to take action and make a difference. So thank you for hanging in. Thank you for listening to me drone on. But again, thank you to Megan and thank you to Spike for really giving me a lot to think about over the next several days and weeks. But thanks to you for being such a great community. Remember, please take care of yourselves so that we can take care of others. Good night, everybody.
I will tell you without hesitation, I will tell you that I did not have this anywhere in my 5-year plan, Mr. Anderson.
That much I believe. Yep.
Well, thank you, everyone. Make sure that you take care of yourself so that we can be taking care of others. I'll look forward to seeing you in the coming days. Again, Kurt and Jules, thank you so much for making this a very dynamic conversation today. I'm grateful for your help.
Oh, kill me now. Please tell me this guy's doing some fraud and there's going to be like an insurance investigator or something.
So, Fred, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for sharing your insights and your experience, and can't wait to bring you back, my friend.
I'm looking forward to it. You won't have to try hard. This was a lot of fun. So thank you, everybody.
You hear that? I get the rest of the day off from doctor's orders. That's what I hear.
I will write that prescription anytime for you, sir. And, this will not be our last conversation, especially if you can get me Samantha Lawrence on the show.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll see you before the hearing next week. But thank you for the honor of being your first guest, Joe. And
you bet.
All the kind words. Appreciate it.
Please, let's make sure that we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. Thank you so much.